You might be familiar with the title of a very successful book, Susan Cain's Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. It questions the Western bias in favor of the extroverts, that is, of personalities who are gregarious, who display social ease, are comfortable in the spotlight. Whereas we have a tendency to dismiss introvert characters, to think that this trait of their character can impair their careers, limit their chances in life. For this reason, introverts themselves tend to underestimate their potential, feel guilty about it, think that they have to conform to the social dominant model and do everything they can to overcome their discretion. The main argument of this book is that there are many perks in being introverted. Extroverts often act before thinking, take too many risks, overestimate their ability to extricate themselves from whatever embarrassment the boldness and rashness can cause them, and tend to thrive at the expenses of others. With introverts, the delay in acting and speaking, which they perceive to be a limitation, actually gives them more time to think, helps them to listen more than talk, to have a more circumspect and cautious approach to risk. They tend to focus on what really matters, relationships and meaningful work. They might find difficult to be listened to sometimes, but often speak when most of the others have played their cards, and for this reason, what they say has greater weight. Now, the power of the introverts could be the title for the painting under your eyes, Vilhelm Hammershøi's A Woman in an Interior, a painting of 1913. He is a Danish painter known especially for his poetic, subdued portraits and interiors, whom I discovered at an exhibition at the Kunsthalle in Munich in 2012, so 10 years ago, and loved ever since, has loved ever since. He's a master in visualizing the power of interiority. In this painting, we do not have something coming towards us, but we are drawn into something. All is grey and subdued. The mirror does not reflect anything. Should be the viewer reflected in the mirror, should be us. We are displaced from self-referentiality, from the position of subjects, from seeing everything only from our viewpoint. The only touches of color are the golden frames of the mirror and of the painting in the other room, and the places where the light falls, that is, the neck, the cheeks, the hair of the woman. She is the real focus of the composition, and yet her face is hidden. She is turning her back to us, as often in Hammershøi's paintings. We do not feel that we are intruding because we are kept in the adjacent room, and thus we can look at the woman without bothering her. Crucially, the focal point of the painting is not even the woman. The focal point is hidden. It is that which the woman is holding in her hands and intent on observing. I imagine that she is taking advantage of the light coming from the window to read a letter she has just received. Just as when you receive a letter from a person you love and immediately look for privacy, to savor the joy undisturbed, linger at ease on the words, take as much time as you need. But it only is a guess. Hammershøi deliberately hides from us what the woman is looking at, and we will never know. This is intentional. We have to refrain our curiosity, not only concerning what she might be holding, but also about what she looks like and her emotions at that moment. The important thing seems to be her sheer attitude, staying still, being alone without feeling lonely, taking time to pay attention. We as viewers might eventually be invited to share in what she is enjoying. But for the time being, I clearly asked not to startle her, but wait patiently until she turns towards us, however long this might take. We know that we should not cross the threshold of that room, not disturb her. She seems to ignore us, but in fact, she is totally aware of our presence behind her. And yet, she takes her time, she lets us wait. Because this waiting itself is important. It is teaching us something. When I was an 18-year-old novice in a Benedictine monastery in Tuscany, where I started my monastic life near Siena, I used to visit this nonagenarian monk who spent most of his day sitting near the window, just as this woman does, and praying in the room. He was my spiritual father, director if you want. And when I visited him, he would not engage in conversation with me straight away. I knocked at his door, was invited to come in and to sit in a chair opposite him. Then he would keep still for a while, looking in the direction of the window. I knew that he was not ignoring me. I felt it was a privilege. I was being allowed somehow to soak in the prayerful stillness that filled that room, until after a little while he would eventually turn towards me, smile at me, and ask, "So, Luigi, how are you?" There are paintings that fill us with emotions, and others that seem to have exactly the opposite aim in mind. There seems to be very little to resonate with in this painting, in the series of virtually empty rooms. In the first one, there is only an empty bowl and a mirror that again does not reflect anything, this mirror, anything in particular. There's a little something inside, but you can't really make out what it is. And then there is a lonely chair in the following room. In the last room, there is, you can guess, a little painting. You see just the corner of a little painting that might interest us, but is barely noticeable. We have no way of guessing what it portrays. So the only redeeming feature of this painting seems to lie in the fact that the doors, all the doors, the 3 doors visible, are open. And this time we are drawn in and deep into a space that looks empty and yet is flooded with a light that heightens the whiteness of the doors. When I visit art galleries and museums, I avoid looking at the title of paintings for as long as possible. I do not think that anyone, especially the painter himself, should decide how is this painting going to affect me. Artists are very often poor interpreters of their own work. This painting is known under the imaginative title of 4 Rooms. How original. But I guess that my title for it would be Opening Doors. I find that this painting could act as a mirror for my soul. It does not invite me outwards to reach for the last room, but to unlock and open as many doors as possible inwardly in me. As I look at this painting, and to several others by Hammershøi, which have not human figures, but depict only apparently uninhabited interiors, what comes to my mind is the Holy of Holies in the Second Temple of Jerusalem. So this is a kind of reconstruction of the Second Temple. So the Holy of Holies, as you might know, was the inner part of the Jewish temple, built according to the meticulous instructions given in the book of Leviticus. In Solomon's building, the Holy of Holies was supposed to harbor the Ark, which you see in one of these images, of the covenant, which contained, or was supposed to contain, the tables of the Ten Commandments given to Moses by God, something tangibly sacred, which justified the extreme reverence in which the place was held. When, however, the temple was destroyed at the time of the exile and rebuilt after the Babylonian captivity, they had lost the Ark of the Covenant. It had been destroyed, or probably somewhere, so if you want to find it. And what happened was, so we have another image, this is the Temple of Herod, but the Temple of Herod, like the Second Temple, was built exactly in the same way. And in both, the Holy of Holies was absolutely empty, was kept absolutely empty. And yet it was invested with just the same sacrality as in the original temple. I've always thought that emptiness was not the mere result of an historical accident, the loss of the Ark at the time of the exile, but the sign of an evolution in the faith of Israel. What looks like emptiness, in reality, is a receptacle, a holder, a container of God's presence. To believe that God really is among us, I do not need to hold on to some sacred tokens, which incidentally always end up leading their custodians to claim special access to God, special powers, special privileges. Thus, in the end, I can go back to the main picture. I might even decide to give another title to this painting, The Empty Bowl. Yeah, there's this empty bowl in the first room on the table. Again, nothing I've come across concerning Hammershøi's life or spirituality vouches this interpretation, this perception. But this is totally irrelevant. He might have painted this image only to portray empty spaces, for all we know. Whereas what I see in it is an invitation to embrace the same growth and maturation undergone by the people of Israel, which led them to perceive emptiness as receptivity. Emptying ourselves of the inner clutter. One of the reasons why we cannot inhabit our interiority is that we are full of clutter. And this is one of the major challenges of spiritual life. And this is where I think, as I anticipated in my first lecture this morning, mindfulness, as it is has been practiced in Western society for at least 50 years now, and has developed into a form of wisdom, can probably be of some help. We have already discussed how the approach to knowledge that drives modern science, technology, society, and self-perception has achieved a great deal of mastery over reality, but leaves us to wonder whether the price for this success has not been a calamitous loss of agency? Are we really the actors of our existence? Are we really present to what we do? The obstacle is not just a frenetic lifestyles marked by worry and unending stress, but more fundamentally, the habitual mode in which we function. Planning, project, and achievement, constantly assigning tasks to ourselves, performing most of our daily actions routinely, mechanically, functioning in automatic pilot. We do have pauses. From time to time, we do let ourselves be captivated by something out of the ordinary. Thankfully, we have ways of relaxing. But nothing ever really slows down the perennial flow of thoughts and emotions which filter and color everything we see and do. Nothing really soothes the anxiety that keeps lurking under the surface of all our endeavors and takes hold of us whenever we let down our guard. We spend most of our lives doing one thing and thinking about another, never really fully attending to what is actually happening here and now, thereby missing who we really are, what we really want and need, missing the reality of the people we interact with, missing the ways in which God makes himself known to us, walks with us, cares for us, just as the disciples of Emmaus were missing who was walking with them. How often do we not have to remind ourselves of why we do what we do and what our priorities and our values are or should be? We need reminding constantly. How can we lose sight of such essential aspects of our identity? How often are we not mindless of what we do, unable to fully attend to a task, to listen properly to a person, to be on the top of things? Stress is pervasive in our lives precisely because we are like people who drive a car with music at full blast and are unable to hear the engine and know whether they are using the right gear. We are stressed because most of the time we deal mindlessly with what comes our way and let our emotions, ruminations, anxieties, reflexes determine our reactions unconsciously. In a word, we have lost the ability to live mindfully, that is, of knowing what we are doing while we are doing it. And mindfulness is as simple as that, knowing what we are doing while we are doing it, being present to what we are doing now. To use an image, usually we do not give much thought to the activity of walking. It is something we can perform automatically, mindlessly. Things change, however, when we are climbing on a mountain track. Then we have to be intentional about our pace, watch carefully where we put our feet, pay close attention to the terrain. Mindless hiking can put our lives at risk. Mindful hiking means that we have to maintain alive our awareness of where we are and of what we are doing at each step, at each moment. In the same way, the practice of mindful meditation consists in being aware in the here and now. And this is achieved by focusing our attention on what we are doing in the present, in sustaining this attention and patiently switching it back to the present moment each time that inevitably it is disrupted by thoughts, emotions, distractions, and we drift away. Often we have this reductive idea of mindfulness as a state of quiet, peace and serenity achieved through mental and bodily discipline. This can indeed be the case, But it is not what mindfulness really is about. At heart, mindfulness consists in being where we already are, in the here and now, embracing what we are experiencing in the present moment. It is paying attention to the present moment without wishing it were otherwise. This is why the object of mindfulness can be virtually anything. It is true that it tends to favor focus on the body, on the breathing. It aims at stilling the mind by stilling the body. Stilling the mind by stilling the body. Stillness, however, does not mean absence of turmoil. The mind, thoughts, or emotions keep pulling us in all directions. The body can be in pain, fretful, unable to relax. Insofar as any of these thoughts, emotions, these bodily discomforts are what we are experiencing here and now, all we are asked to do is paying attention to them, be aware of them, let them be. This type of attention and awareness required by mindfulness relies on the assiduous cultivation of some fundamental attitudes which I pointed towards earlier, and which authors describe in a variety of ways which overlap with each other and can be boiled down to two headings: non-judgment and acceptance. So the other attitudes cluster around these two headings. So in the way I deal with reality, with what it is here and now, non-judgment goes with patience and trust, and acceptance with non-striving and letting go. The first cluster of attitudes around non-judgment is meant to help us to pay attention to a present experience by suspending judgment, which can be one of the most difficult aspects of mindfulness to understand. It does not mean that anything goes, that we should give up a moral compass, or that we are not entitled to prefer some things to others. Often, however, we rush into judgment or express our liking and disliking without having properly paid attention to what is in front of us. Paying attention to reality properly is a form of patience, insofar as it means taking the time to let whatever we are experiencing in the moment unfold at its pace, without exercising any pressure. Mindfulness is based on the presupposition that healing is coming to terms with things as they are. This can be as basic as resisting the impulse to be exasperated by the inner resistance we encounter as soon as we try to still our mind and our body, to pray or to meditate. Patience should be exercised first of all with ourselves. We should trust that just by calmly redirecting our attention to the here and now, each time it is hijacked by recurrent thoughts and emotions, will eventually become more stable and durable. The judgments we should resist too can be as simple as, "This is not working," or "I'm useless at it." Instead, the image we should call to mind and visualize is to visualize what we do each time we practice mindfulness as the planting of a seed. The only thing we can do is keep the soil free of weed, that is of judgment, water it, and patiently wait, trusting the natural process of germination. And then the second cluster of attitudes around acceptance overlaps with the first insofar as it focuses on acceptance of what is there in the here and now. We might long for a time of stillness and peace, and instead persistent thoughts, worries, anxieties, memories claim our attention. I've often found that the first thought which comes to my mind as soon as I try to pray or meditate is what worries me most at that moment in my life. In the past month, it has been tax return. I'm not required to fight this worry, to strive against it. I should just take note of it, accept the worry, observe it for a while, then let it go by returning to the here and now, by reorienting my attention to whatever I've chosen to do at that moment to stay in the presence of myself and in God's presence. Meditation, in the case of mindfulness, is very helped by the breathing. I'm going to say something about this in a moment. But meditation is not the breathing, not just the stillness achieved when I manage to remain attentive to the here and now for a while. Meditation is primarily this constant, patient discipline consisting in accepting whatever claims my attention and letting it go and returning to the body, the breathing, the here and now. Endlessly repeated, this movement becomes a reflex, a habit. The more we repeat it, the easier it becomes. So, mindfulness is about stilling the mind by stilling the body, paying attention to the present moment, non-judgmental and accepting awareness of what is happening in the here and now. So how do we achieve this practically according to this secular wisdom of mindfulness, which is, as you know, comes from the East, from Buddhism in particular, the Zen Buddhism of Vipassana, but has been secularized and has been used in a variety of ways therapeutically, and has really proven its effectiveness. An image to represent what we do when we try to practice mindfulness is that of a small boat drifting in the sea. We live in habitual mindless reaction to external solicitations, or to the internal constant flow of memories and worries which glue us to the past, a past already gone, or propels us into a future which does not yet exist. In other words, we are somehow captive of dimensions which are not real anymore, or not yet real. And paradoxically, this stops us from remaining in the only dimension in which we can make a difference, because it is the only one which is real, that is the present moment, the here and now. And incidentally, this is what was happening to the disciples of Emmaus. They were traumatized about the past and worried about it. Traumatized about the past, worried about the future. And they were not able to see what was happening to them in the present. So that just as this attitude prevents us from being aware of ourselves, it also prevents us from being aware of God. Just like a boat then, what we need is an anchor which keeps us where we want to be, and at least for a little while restores our agency, establishes ourselves in the here and now, sustains our self-awareness and our attention to things as they are, letting them to unfold at their rhythm and from their viewpoint. And this anchor is our body. And more especially, it has proven to be our breath. And this for a simple reason. Our breath is always there, is happening now, is always available, takes place in a central part of our body, and just as it does with air, it takes us from the outside to the inside. Importantly, it is not a particular way of breathing, but our breath as it is, which we take for granted, never notice. Unless we struggle with it, we are out of breath, as we say. There is nothing mystical about it. It simply is something that can help us to practice mindfulness by anchoring our attention to the here and now, giving the mind one thing to keep track of, namely the breath, to replace the whole range of things that it usually finds to preoccupy itself enhances our power of concentration. Mindfulness can be practiced in a variety of other ways, but mindful breathing has proved to be uniquely rewarding. At least I find it uniquely rewarding when I try to pray. So I start praying always with a little time of mindfulness. So for 10 minutes I do this mindful breathing that stills my body. And by stilling my body, I still my mind. And so I become more able then to pay attention to God's presence. Observing the breath as it flows in and out, giving full attention to it. Whenever thoughts, emotions, body discomfort takes us elsewhere, we should become aware of them, name them, and let them go. And return our attention to the present moment by concentrating again on the breath. As I said earlier, mindfulness is not the focus on breath, but this constant, patient, gentle, persistent redirection of our awareness to the here and now with the help of the breath whenever we drift away. It is not an exercise in emptying our mind or achieving a state of relaxation, quiet, peace, detachment. Of course, by practicing it progressively, we do gain access to ever deeper stillness of body and mind, which in turn does have a soothing effect on stress, anxiety, worries, and even on physical discomfort and pain. This is why mindfulness is so widely practiced for therapeutical purposes. These, however, should somehow be considered just byproducts of mindfulness. Its aim simply is achieving presence to what is real, what is offered to us in the here and now, be it ourselves, the world, or God. In the next of our meditations this afternoon, I'm going to try to bridge the two and show how a lot of what has become popular, has been practiced in the secular form of mindfulness, in reality has been present in Christian tradition from the beginning, especially in Christian monastic tradition. And the other thing is my purpose today is not to give you a theoretical approach to these two issues, but really what I'm telling you is what I'm practicing. Because it is true that since I've rediscovered some of aspects of what I'm talking to you through mindfulness, this has made my life of prayer and of contemplative prayer in particular deeper. I become more able to recognize God's presence in the present moment thanks to a practice that helps me to abide in the here and now. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.